Hi, I'm Ann Terabini and welcome to LearnHowToQuilt.com's free tutorials. In this tutorial you'll learn how to sew an accurate 1/4 inch seam. Before we get started you might want to gather a few supplies so you can follow along. You'll notice I have my sewing machine set up with the tray attached. You do not have to use a tray on your sewing machine, but if you have one I recommend setting it up with the tray, because it makes it a little bit easier to handle your fabric when you're sewing. I'm using a red colored thread to thread my machine. This is in high contrast to the fabric scraps that I'm using. The reason why I'm using red is to make it easier for you to see that 1/4 inch seam allowance. So you might want to use a high contrasting thread also to make it easier for you to see where that 1/4 inch seam is. Quilters, however, usually use a more neutral color thread like you'll see on this mat over in the corner. Some of the other supplies that you're going to need to gather are rulers, or a ruler with 1/4 inches marked on it, or 1/4 inch graph paper. And we're going to use either the ruler or the graph paper to help you mark where that 1/4 inch is on your sewing machine. You'll also need either blue painter's tape or masking tape or post-it notes or some sort of adhesive to mark where that 1/4 inch is on your machine. You will need fabric scraps. I've cut the fabric. I've used the pale yellow, light green. I've cut those scraps about 2.5 inches by about 6 inches. Any size scraps will do. It's just I would recommend that you use 100% cotton fabric, because that's the fabric that most quilters use when making quilts. You also need scissors, and I've got little tiny scraps of fabric for what I call a leader and a follower, and I'll explain that later, but any little scraps of fabric will do. An all-purpose foot for your sewing machine will work just fine. However, please note that I will be using a 1/4 inch foot that I've purchased separately from my machine, and the 1/4 inch foot makes it a little bit easier to follow that 1/4 inch seam.